Alrighty. Looks like we've got video. Looks like we've got audio. I think we're ready to kick this off. Here we go. Bam. All right. Ladies, gentlemen, wonderful human beings. Hello and welcome to another Hobby Hangout here with Staghammer Studio. I am your humble host, Wes, and we're going to be doing some fun hobby stuff today. Wow, this light is really blowing me out today, and I'm real shiny. Anywho, oh, good times, good times. All right, well, hi everyone. I lied, and I apologize for that. I am a liar. My pants were on fire. And by that, I mean, I said that I was going to be streaming on Friday at last week's show, and said we would be back on a normal schedule. And that was because I am a dum-dum. And I forgot that my wife is going out of town this weekend. And so as a result, hello, welcome to the stream. Yeah, my wife is going out of town this weekend, and so as a result, I will be solo parenting. But you know, she's a 2-year-old, my daughter, and I can't take care of her and stream simultaneously, and that would be utter chaos. So we're doing it tonight, and then that's just it. That's the plan. That's what we're doing. So hi, we're here. We're streaming. Look at me go. Wow. So I hope everybody had a good week up until now, and I hope if you know, your week hasn't ended, as it's only Thursday, that the rest of your week is also good. I hope you guys have a good weekend as well. Boy, oh boy. We had some stormy weather up here in the Northeast, as did most of the East Coast. So that's over. Fortunately, we did not lose power during the tropical storm. Somehow, my little island neighborhood in the middle of nowhere ended up not losing power, while everything around us was just black that night. So, you know, I feel fortunate, especially because we have a well, and no electricity means no water also, which it's no bueno. But anyway, that's enough of that. I actually had a vaguely productive weekend and kind of sort of week. I've been dabbling with a few little projects on and off as I get a little bit of time, which hasn't been a lot, but it's been enough. So first of all, I did manage to, and I'm not going to bother hold them up because you're not going to notice the difference, but I did manage to, as I promised at the end of the stream last week, put a couple of coats of matte varnish on the goblins I've been working on over the last couple of episodes. So they're ready for metallics. I haven't finished them up yet, but I figured I'd save that for the stream. However, I did, and if you have been following me on Instagram and Facebook and whatnot, Twitter as well, you would have probably seen pictures. This guy right here. Oh, goodness, that. No, there we go. That's a little better. So this is the giant cave squig that is being ridden by one of the goblins, who is going to be the leader of this particular force. And he's got like this super, like, just janky lance, and it's just really funny. He's basically barely holding on to the thing. But anyway, so that guy is almost done. I have to finish the base on him, and then I think I'm going to call him good enough. And then Let's see if we can get, again, the camera to check these guys out. So these were a couple of the smaller squigs that I did as well. And they are in a similar state. They just need the bases done. And I believe, let me just kind of quickly double check them. Yeah, they look relatively done-ish. Good enough for me, at least. So we're going to slap some basing stuff on them and just kind of set them to dry. We'll probably do that first thing just to get it out of the way. I did grab myself just a primed version of the squig. So I should have time. We'll see. But we'll come back to him, and I'll sort of walk you through my process with these guys, because it's been a fun scheme. They just look fleshy and gross, and I like them. Let's see. Other random progress stuff. So I picked up on eBay one of these. You can see here the Mage Wrath Throne. It's a terrain piece from GW. It's been in their stable of terrain stuff for years. This was just the throne portion of it that I picked up as bits. Unfortunately, and I contacted the eBay seller to try and see if we could remedy this somehow. And of course, now I can't find the other missing piece. But basically, you'll notice down here, the other skull is missing. So it came, he sent it to me with two of this skull on this side, and they're like mirror image of each other. So the one for this side, I should say the other skull that came is a duplicate of this piece. So it doesn't fit properly onto this side. So I messaged him and was just kind of like, hey, you sent me two of the same piece, so I'm technically missing a piece. Can I send this back to you? And maybe, you know, we can do that. And I've bought from this guy before, so I was like, you know, if it's easy, I mean, I'm gonna buy from you again. Like, I can just send you the missing piece, or the duplicate piece, and then I'll just buy something else from you, and then you can just toss that little bit in with everything else, and we'll just call it even. I haven't heard back from him yet, so I'm hoping that I hear back from him soon. Now, the other thing that I picked up is not technically supposed to be for terrain, but I had this like super cool idea for it, or I think it's super cool. So this is, or was, I should say, the bell from the Screaming Bell, which is a Skaven, large Skaven unit. And so it usually has, and there should be like a little, you know, kind of flip around video of this on, I don't know if it made it, I think it made it onto Instagram, but definitely Facebook. But it had like a rat and like a rat head and like the Skaven logo and some Skaven runes and stuff on the carved into the face. So I took sandpaper and a file and an X-Acto knife, and I just carved and sanded and, you know, just buffed it out so that it's not there anymore. So we smoothed out the bell. I also drilled a hole through it and mounted it on this toothpick that when it's all primed up is just going to be, you know, like a metal rod or whatever. I haven't attached it yet, but I'm considering attaching this weird beast skull to the front of it. Just because I think it looks cool. And the idea is I'm going to paint the bell itself in metal, and then this skull is going to be just like an actual skull, and I'm going to take some string and basically like separate the string into like its finer strands and use that to like loop around the bell so it looks like somebody just tied the skull to it. So it's not just like randomly mounted on there. But anyway, so that comes suspended in these little archways, right? Now, normally the arch, it's like very close together like this. And because of what I had planned and the size of the bell, I needed to sort of space things out a little bit, which is why I added that extra length on the axle with that toothpick. So again, these had like little Skaven runes and stuff like on the side of the stone. So those have been shaved flat and flush. And then what I did was from the skull box from the Citadel skull box. I just clipped out a bunch of skulls and started sticking them on at the base. So basically, where the axle connects is this big orc skull, and that's on both sides. So basically, the rod goes in like straight into its mouth and then into the stone. So those will be painted up to look like metal, as if it was like some just sort of embellishment there. But then I started on this one, adding skulls with plastic cement, just tacking them on around the perimeter. And I'm going to stack up another layer on top, so it's like skulls just piled around it. Now, what I did was, you might remember from a previous episode, we painted up these pillars and the torches and all that. Well, what I did was, and I don't know if, no, it's not going to catch it. Of course not. Why would it? But what I did was I glued a magnet on the underside of the top. So all the way buried in that pillar, there's a magnet in there. So now, and in the middle of the skull pile on the bottom of the pillar, there's hidden a little magnet. So now this magnetizes on reasonably well to the top of the pillar. So it's a little bit more modular. I don't have to keep it on there if I don't want to. So if I just want like the bare pillars, it's not scarred or scuffed up. And these have been, I'm pretty sure these have been varnished. But either way, I'll probably throw some more varnish on them just to make sure. But that way the paint won't scrape off. But basically, you know, these can then clip onto the top. And then here's the other. And that one there. So then you'll get a nice spaced out sort of like archway between the two with the large bell hanging in between. And this is going to be for some of my Shyish terrain, Realm of Death terrain. And it's basically like I've got like a whole like temple complex that I'm sort of building. And so this will all be part of it. And chances are, I have here my thought process for that throne was I have this piece that came as like a piece for one of the temple terrain things. Shattered Stormbolt, I want to say it's called. But anyway, so I really liked the stairs here, and it had this like dais platform thing, and one of the things I was going to do with it was have it facing out this way, and I had, again, painted up on the stream here, this brazier here, and the plan was that this was going to be like a place for like the necromancer or the evil priests or whatever to kind of like stand up here and do little like, weird rituals and sermons and whatnot. But flip it around and put a sweet throne on top of it. And now you're getting double duty out of the stairs piece, and it's going to look pretty damn cool. And my vampire lord can camp out in the chair as like part of the narrative whenever that happens to be a thing. Or I suppose theoretically some like necromancer could be chilling in there, or really anybody important enough to be sitting in a throne. So anyway, that was sort of my thought process for that. And realistically, like when you look at all the embellishments on here, you've got like the bat wings and the skulls and stuff, and it's very very reminiscent of the old and my Warhammer history is a little iffy, so I don't know if this actually was connected with the vampire court or vampire counts in any way, shape, or form in Warhammer Fantasy Battles. It certainly isn't currently in any current lore, but I thought it looked very vampire-y, so I was like, what better for a sweet throne for my vampire lord than that thing. So that'll be painted up at some point, probably in like weathered bronze. I'm thinking like a dark weathered bronze. I kind of think that sounds like it'll look cool. Anyway, so what are we working on today, you might ask? And I honestly found myself asking that about 20 minutes ago, which was about 3 minutes before the stream started. So basically, we're gonna work on finishing up those 20 Grot Stabbas, which I believe it's just the red on their hats, and some of them I believe still need metallics. It looks like I got a coat of metallics on their weapons, but their shield, the banding around their shield needs metallics still. And I might find a couple of other odd things that need it. But they are almost done. So we're going to get them done, and then we're going to start slapping some... Oh, am I going to do that? No, that's not going to be fun or interesting. So we're going to leave the basing for some other time. But what I will do is, once those guys are all done, we'll start on this little squig guy here, so that you guys can get an idea of how I did that, and it will get me one more squig done. So dual purpose. And if for whatever reason there happens to be a smidge of extra time, which I doubt, I will probably work on the archway and adding some more skulls on that. So it'll just be a little bit of like, you know, me cutting and gluing stuff, and so fun. Anywho, all right. That realistically is enough of that. So we're gonna flip on down to the desk. We're gonna adjust our lamp, and that weird... Oh, I know what that is. Okay, never mind. We're gonna drink some water. Because hydration is important. Okay. So, let's start at the sort of beginning here. We're gonna grab our little goblins. So a little bit of, I guess, background for those that are not familiar. The Squigs here are part of the same army as the goblins. They are like a weird weaponized fungus, I think. They're like bizarre cave creatures that have grown, I think, out of like sentient fungus. At the very least, they eat fungus and live in caves. That much I'm sure of. And basically, the goblins will... They don't, like... They're too chaotic and weird to, like, make them pets. That's not the right term. But the goblins will basically, like, harness their general hunger and herd them towards the enemy. And they just kind of stampede in and just start eating everything in sight. So I have suitably named a squig herd. So I've got, I think it's 10 of the squigs and then 2 herders. Something like that. That sounds like accurate math. But we'll get to the rest of those things at some point. All right, so let's get to the more important stuff. Oh, and I know I'm getting myself on a tangent already when I just said we were going to get to important stuff. So my goofy, like, I set up like this goofy jig here. So I magnetized this 25 millimeter base. Now, I didn't feel bad that I was like wasting a magnet or anything, because I can always use this base for something later, and I put magnets on all of my bases eventually just for storage. But that magnet, it has the matching polarity for these arch pieces. So I was able to magnetize them to this base, and then use this as a more firm base. As long as I didn't get any plastic glue on this that would then adhere the skulls directly to it, I could basically like nest the skulls up against the side and just put a drop of plastic cement there. And then, you know, just kind of after doing a ring around, I just let it dry overnight. And that got me to you know, where this one is here. And you can see how they like very well fit on that that base. But this gave me a, you know, like I said, like a good like platform and handle to like hold and make sure that everything was attached properly. And then it just so happens that this is, you know, roughly the right size to fit on top of that pillar too. So it was a lot of little things that all kind of worked out together. So I don't know. Anyway, I was rather, I guess, proud of that little notion. Okay, where is... Did I already get him? Did I fix him already? I guess so. One of these goblins I noticed the other day when I was painting the, I think it was over the weekend sometime, when I was painting the weapon blades. I noticed one of them, I had missed painting his shoes somehow. And unless, is it this guy? Well, I know this is riveting as I check the feet of all of the ones that I've painted. Ah, there he is. So this little fella right here, I didn't paint his little boots. So while I've got my palette out and I'm thinking about it, we're gonna hit those real quick. Okay, on to the actual. Only been 20 minutes of me just jabbering. All right, so moisten our brush. Pop the top on our wet palette. And I actually had a little bit of foresight, and right before I started up the stream here, I did put some wash on the base of this giant cave squig. So that is actually, from the looks of it, is already dry, which is good because I can't count the number of times that I have forgotten, and then halfway through the stream, when I go to switch to that project, I go, oh, I should put some wash on this. And then I sit there staring at it for a while as we all collectively wait for it to dry, which is not entertaining. So I tried to get that kind of out of the way. All right. So we are going to grab us some of this dark brown, and this is just Rhinox hide from Citadel. Lightly watered down. Don't need it super thin for this. It's just some boots. Chances are, because I'm sloppy and whatever, I'm probably going to end up getting some brown texture paint on them anyway when I do the bases, so it's not really that, you know, whatever. They're running around in mud and caves. The same caves that squigs live in, so there's probably a fair amount of squig excrement lying around. All right. All is right with the world. He has brown shoes. Okay, I have some of the red on this palette, so let me get that mixed up real quick because it started to separate a smidge. All right, now you can maybe tell. This is, by the way, it's called Chaotic Red from Army Paints. Or Army Painter, sorry, War Paints. And it is a very dark red. But it is, I felt, a nice color for like dark, wet blood. So that's kind of their thing, is they dip their hats in the blood of their enemies. In this case, their hats are just little robes, the hoods. We want this real thin Maybe it's a glaze. I don't know if it's technically down to glaze consistency yet, but it's real thin. I'm going to call it a glaze just because that's kind of my intent with it, at least. And just kind of real thin, like just glaze this in. Always pulling to the tip, because where your brush lifts off is where the paint collects. And you're always going to deposit just a little bit more at the tip. So that ensures that the color is strongest there. And we'll come back and do like another little layer. More likely a couple of layers just to reach the color we want. But the idea is that it'll sort of, there'll be a rough transition at least from the black, dark gray of the hood to the red on the tip. As if the blood soaked into the tip has, you know, started to leach into the hood. Maybe it's drying on the sort of outer reaches of the blood stain, that kind of thing. Maybe I'm putting too much thought into this. I wouldn't be surprised. But sometimes it's fun to overthink these weird little things. But I have to say I'm fairly happy with how these guys have turned out so far. They have more or less turned out as I envisioned them when I first thought of the paint job and the army in general, which is a good sign. It means I don't really know what that means. It means I'm getting better at translating my goofy ideas to some form of reality. One thing I haven't really done so far is come up with much of a backstory for these guys. I feel like that's what they're missing. I went over on the stream not too long ago my ideas for my Shyish Corn army. Corn being the god of blood and skulls. One of the gods of chaos. Now, I also have a very, very small ogre force, the ogre maw tribes, and I came up with a fun backstory for them, which was actually easier than I thought it would be. But I don't really have a good one for these guys yet. And I feel like they deserve one because they're just wacky and fun, and they are probably going to be in some of the first battle reports that I do, as sort of an adversary and foil to my Vampire Lord. So, we'll see. We're just rocking right along here. I think I've got almost half of them done already. So the idea is on successive layers and applications of this color, I will be covering a little bit less and a little bit less. I'm basically, if you can see, I think I'm doing an okay job of keeping it in frame, although the picture's not particularly tight on what I'm doing. But I'm basically getting like the top maybe half in this thin, first thin pass. Trying not to let it, like I'm wicking off any of the excess and applying it like a glaze. So it's just like a thin, even layer. And then I will cover maybe 3/4 of this in the next pass. and then, you know, maybe half of the initial pass, you know, basically shrinking the area covered by roughly 1/4 each time. And that will get like a slow fade going from this first introduction of the color into like a more saturated version of it at the very tip. At least that's the idea. Sometimes I think I sound like I know what I'm talking about more than I actually know what I'm talking about. Maybe the better way of saying it is, I feel like I have, or think I have, I don't know, like a relative, like what I would call like book smarts knowledge of how some of this is supposed to work mechanically, and by some of this I mean painting. Like I understand some of the, you know, sort of basic fundamentals, but like sometimes I think that my painting should be better than it is based on the things that I know. But I think I spend more time rushing through most projects just to kind of get them done. Not that I don't like them, it's just I don't usually have a lot of time, and I'm trying to get a bunch of stuff done in a relatively short amount of time. So it is now, after all, August, and I've been promising over and over again that my battle reports were going to be coming by the, quote, end of summer, end quote, which, as it is August, that is rapidly approaching, and I have done pretty much nothing. I mean, technically speaking, all of this painting that I've been doing here on stream and, you know, what little hobby time I've had, like, off camera, that has also been with my battle reports in mind, sort of getting things ready for it. But I really need to work on, I need to get to Lowe's and get some stuff to build out the frame, or not the frame, the what's the word I'm looking for? Good Lord. I don't know. We'll call it a frame. Whatever. We'll go back to that word. Basically, I'm going to be suspending like a PVC pipe sort of framework over my gaming table so that I can hook my camera up to it, so I can get some top-down angles on what's going on that I can then mix in to any other camera angles that I happen to be doing. The thing that I don't know, it doesn't, I can't say it upsets me. It actually, I think, if nothing else, it's the opposite. I think it actually like fills me with a little bit of promise, and makes me somewhat excited. So one of my favorite battle report channels that exists for this game is Rerolling Ones over on the West Coast, and they have had sort of a lean towards the narrative side of things. Most of their games have been like anything between, you know, 1,000, 1,500, maybe some 2,000 point games. And it's like, you know, 3 or 4 friends that will, you know, sort of play just games against each other with their own armies. And they've done some narrative stuff, and I would argue they've done some more narrative driven things than most of the other battle report channels that are out there. And when I set forth to do battle reports, I knew I wanted to do something narrative. Like, I wanted to tell stories. I wanted it to be like D&D, but with armies. That's how I sold it to my friends, and they were like, yeah, that sounds awesome. So, effectively, that is still sort of my plan. But recently, as some of the sort of COVID restrictions have been lifting in other places around the country, they have, I believe, the fine folks at Rerolling Ones have started filming battle reports again. And they announced that they were going to be doing like this extensive sort of narrative campaign, which was funny to me, at least, because, you know, this was sort of like, I had been planning to do this for so long and never pulled the trigger on it, and then as I start to pull the trigger on it, they basically beat me to the punch. Not that they obviously had any idea who I am or what I was doing, but I guess if nothing else, my hope was, because I saw there was not a large, like there weren't a lot of other channels doing heavy narrative stuff, so it was sort of like what I wanted to do, because A, I like that stuff, and B, it looked like it was like I guess like a spot in the YouTube market that was not already super well represented. Which I guess, technically speaking, even if Rerolling Ones is doing that kind of thing, it's still like it's well represented by them, and that's it. You know what I mean? So like that makes me feel like there's room for more. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. Not that I'm expecting to be any real competition towards them anyway. They've got a huge channel and a solid following, but it's they certainly are an inspiration, but it is I guess it's unfortunate that, what am I trying to say? It's unfortunate that it may be interpreted by others that I am attempting to copy them, I guess. Which, I don't know. Maybe that's an unfounded just sort of anxiety of mine. Which is probably the case. There's plenty of those. I feel like anxiety is not in short order for me. All right. So this is my second pass on the red, by the way, as some of you may have noticed. And I think this will be my final one. I was going to do 3 passes, but I feel like this is getting me to a point where I'm happy with the color on the tip. And it's got like a noticeable transition in that you can see where it goes from, you know, darker red or brighter, more saturated red to like the sort of finished, or the man, West Talks take 2. What am I trying to say? It goes from that more saturated red to the black and or gray, with a transition. It's not like a super good smooth transition, but good enough. And I'm not going to sit here for hours trying to glaze back and forth, trying to get it just so. All right. The unfortunate thing is, and I think I'm glad that I chose a very sort of like dark, sort of generally desaturated red, and not like some bright, you know, bright red. I generally like to try and spread a color throughout the model, and as I look at these The only real spot on them that has red is the little tip on their hood. But I did glaze some red onto their nose, and they do have red, like, sort of like dropped into the shadows around their eyes. So technically there is red elsewhere on the model. And from a temperature standpoint, their skin technically registers as like a warm color. So it does spread warmth elsewhere throughout the model. So I don't know. Maybe when I take some pictures and post them up, I don't know if, you know, you guys can sort of give me much in the way of an opinion on that now. But, you know, in the comments or in the chat or whatever, just let me know what y'all think. And I'll be throwing some pictures up after I finish these guys, and we'll get the unit together and take some family photos. Okay. So I think we're done. Done with the wet palette. Lid on that. Take another sip of water. All right. Okay. I'm going to, before I jump to the metallics, we're going to get a little bit of a start on this squig, I think. Just because I can easily throw like a base coat on this guy and then set him off to the side to let that dry. And while that's drying, I can work on, start working on the metallics here. So I'm trying to multitask as best as possible here. So we're gonna take a large brush, dampen that, mix up our base color for the flesh. So the recipe I chose for this flesh, I wanted, and I don't know how well this translates, but if you've ever seen like a naked mole rat or any of those like weird hairless like subterranean creatures, or even like deep sea creatures that live like in the super deep sea and just never see sunlight, like they're all either like clear or like super pale, like just like white, almost like albino looking. And I wanted to try and pull that kind of a vibe with these guys. Like they live in deep, dark, dank caves. They only come out at night to like raid local villages and stuff like that. Like they're not daytime creatures. So anyway, I wanted to try and evoke that sort of feeling. So that's why I opted for this like weird sort of like, typically, and I say it's weird because typically squigs are super brightly colored. Like in most other people's grot armies, they are like, the usual color is like bright red. And I'm talking like fire engine red. Obviously that's not the route I took. And I very much wanted, like I said, that sort of like just crazy pale sort of look to them. So I opted for a lot of like sort of like Caucasian human flesh tones. And I'm actually pretty darn fond of how the scheme came together. So I used Stynel Res White Airbrush Primer on these guys to just lay down like an initial prime and sort of base undercoat. And that was not so much because I wanted the white undercoat as it was, well, all right, let me rephrase that. It's not because I wanted the white undercoat for the flesh tones. My initial plan was to use like a watered down red wash or like a glaze or something like that, and try and do a white undercoat, and then with a glaze of that, tint the skin like a pink with like deeper reds in the recesses. So it just looked like maybe it would be red skin if it was out in the sun, and like not, or in its, you know, like in the breed or the species in its early, you know, evolution, maybe it had red skin, but because it's been sitting in caves for so long, it just lost that pigmentation. Yeah. So that was my initial plan, and I did a couple, the two that I painted before, each one of them was painted with a different wash to kind of test that theory, and I ended up hating all of them. So I decided to experiment with this, and then ended up falling in love with it. So this color right here, this is, again, from Citadel. This is Bugman's Glow, and it's like a very sort of like dark pink, like almost like a tanned or sunburnt skin color. Yeah, so this is the color I use as the base, and then we do a heavy dry brush over this with what is it, Cadian? No, Kislev flesh, and then over that an even lighter directional downward only dry brush of Flayed One flesh, and that with some Caraberg Crimson washed onto the base and around the mouth, or specifically around the eyes and the mouth. Again, sort of like leading to that sort of like weird albino underground dweller. I'm not saying albinos are weird. I feel like that's what it sounded like I said. Anyway, not my intent. Moving on. We are needing to let that dry. Okay, so we've reached the point where we need to let this dry because I've just started moving around and tearing up my previous layers. All right, so we're going to give that ample time to dry. Close that up. We're going to switch over to the goblins. We're going to grab us a... Let's try this brush. This should work, but if it proves to be too big and too unwieldy, I have smaller. We are going to shake up our metallic of choice for this in particular, which is Vallejo's metal color in steel. I have Vince Ventruella to thank for turning me on to this particular brand of metal paints. He is a hobby legend in my eyes. Absolutely a hobby hero and a huge inspiration in general. If you have never seen any of his videos and you are in any way, shape, or form interested in painting, I highly recommend you check out his channel. He has just a metric shit ton of amazing, amazing painting videos. And I am grossly out of frame. Alright. Need to adjust this light a little bit because I can't see. It's right in my face. Now, it occurred to me at one point that the backside of the shields, like the inside of the shields, are real messy. They've got like flesh paint from his hands everywhere, and they're not well painted at all. And then about 3 seconds after I had that thought, I immediately said, who cares? Because, again, these are not painted for any sort of competition. I am not trying to paint these to any particular high level. Realistically, nobody will ever see it. So I'm not going to bother painting and try and make it look good. I painted the hand, and you can, from several angles, see the hand, but you have to, like, really kind of hold these things, like, upside down and backwards to see the backside of that shield. And that just seems like way more work than it's worth. Especially since, you know, again, sort of beating a dead horse here. These guys are like dime a dozen battle line that are meant to just die in herds. And they are not they are not worthy of that sort of time investment. Looks like this one already has a coat of metallic on the shield, so we're just going to freshen it up with a second coat because I can see some blotches. But yeah, like there's a time and a place for painting to your absolute best, and there's also nothing saying that I can't come back and fix it up later, you know. But right now, as it stands, there's no need for me to do that, so I'm not going to bother. And yes, this is probably me trying to rationalize and justify it to myself, because my inner OCD is screaming at me for not actually painting that part. Keep in mind, I am also the same person that will paint certain models in sub-assemblies because their cloak covers their back, and I won't be able to, like, paint their back. Let me repeat that sentence back to you, slower. I will paint in sub-assemblies because I want to paint their back that will be covered by a cloak. Let that sink in. Yeah. Literally will never be seen, and I still want to paint it because I don't want to leave a patch of unpainted model. Yep. So in a sense, this is me sort of curtailing that that drive. There is certainly, like I said, there's a time and a place for painting to your maximum. And I feel like, you know, if this was not just like any commission, but if this was being painted like for like a high-end commission, or if this was being painted for some sort of a competition, then obviously it would be different, and I would lavish a little bit more attention on these guys. But as it stands, they're going to be like tabletop minions that just kind of hang out in an army. They're not going to last long, and they're going to be on camera from probably a fair distance. So they're not going to be getting a lot of screen time. Hopefully I'm managing to kind of keep this in frame. I'm trying to get better as I go here because I've already been drifting out a lot tonight. And this is not necessarily difficult to paint, but right now I'm struggling to sort of like keep a good eye on it because it's metallic paint, so it's reflecting the light, and the light is also kind of right in my face. So trying to sort of like punch over the table a little bit so I can see better, keep things in frame so that you guys can see better. Oh boy. Alright. By the way, completely off topic and off track. I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Travis, who just finished fixing up my car today. I had an issue with my exhaust on my car, and he I think today was technically the second day that he'd been working on it. But yeah, he fixed it up and it's purring like a kitten now. So, whereas before it was sounding more like a grizzly bear. It's kind of terrifying. I'm driving my wife's car to work the last few days because it's just so loud. And I had been reassured that while it was loud, it was not something necessarily that I could get pulled over for. But I sure got side-eyed by a few cops on my way through town. So it's I was also reassured that nothing would fall off of my car, and the vibration that was making alone didn't necessarily make me feel better. Let's put it that way. I had enough faith that I was being led in the correct direction. I was not being led astray. I was not being lied to. However, when your car is making a weird grumbling sound because its exhaust isn't quite connected right, and the whole thing is shaking constantly, you're like hoping and praying that nothing just falls off while you're driving. That would have been unfortunate, but it never did. So that's good. Although several of my coworkers did make fun of me for having an incredibly loud car. And I'm sure my neighbors didn't love it when I was leaving the house at 5:30 in the morning, waking them all up. I think my car was starting to sound a little bit like Lemmy from Motorhead if he'd been up for 24 hours straight in a glass gargling contest. Rest in peace, Lemmy. Alright. We're getting almost done here. We got 5 dudes left. Getting through this. I have to say I'm relatively excited for the weekend. And a little bit terrified at the same time. So, to give a little background, my daughter is now almost 2. She'll be 2 in August. So, during that 2-year span, we have, my wife and I have basically just devoted all of our time to her. As, you know, parents do, I assume. But anywho, my wife is going away for the weekend to visit a friend up in New Hampshire. And I am being left in sole charge of our 2-year-old daughter, which is exciting because I absolutely adore my daughter and love spending time with her. We usually have a grand old time, and I kind of want to come up with something cool to do. I'll have to check the weather and figure out, like, maybe we can go do something somewhere, go for a walk or something like that, or find like a little park that she can just run around and play in for however long. But anyway, but this is like sort of the first time that my wife and my daughter is very much like a mama's girl. So she's used to, like, still nursing, and you know, when it's time for her to go to sleep, like I can get her to go to sleep and I can put her to sleep, but she often will wake up looking for my wife. So to not have her around for a couple of days, I don't know, it's going to be interesting, I guess. But I wouldn't say I'm worried in any stretch. Like, that would be an overstatement. Like, I think it's going to go well, but there's a certain measure of uncertainty. And I will say, for those of you that are not parents, there are few things in this world that are as heartbreaking as having a child that is too young to really understand and communicate this idea to, that is like upset and crying for the other parent while they're not around, and you have to try and explain to them, like, that the parent isn't there, but they will be back eventually. Everything is okay. And for whatever reason, that is it's just a sad conversation to have, I guess. I do it all the time when my wife is at work. My daughter gets hungry and she starts, like, looking around going, "Mama, Mama." And I'm like, "Mama's not here. Mama's working. She'll be back in a little bit." But it's the daddy-daughter show right now. The Wes and Morgan show. And she's usually just fine with it, but, you know, it takes her like another, like, hour or two, and then she's asking again. I have to re-explain it to her. Oh, and I'm just off camera, of course. All right, one more, and then we are done. And then it's on to Squig Town. I think this is literally, other than their bases, which I'll do off camera, because that's a whole lot of like do a thing and then like wait for 30 minutes while it dries. But aside from the bases, these guys are now done after completing this step here. So this is exciting. And you guys on the stream here have seen this from start to finish now. And while I'm not going to break any records for getting these guys painted, I did do essentially all of the painting on stream, and I think it's been, with the exception of like one model that I did as like a test model where I basically brought that one to completion just to kind of proof of concept and test the scheme. But yeah, so these 20 guys, and it was what? This is the third episode, and we're an hour in. So that's for 5 hours, give or take, for painting these guys. All right? 2 hours, 2 hours. That's 2 shows. And then another hour. So yeah. So 20 guys in like, let's call it 6 hours. Just for, you know, whatever. Well, that's not bad. I can live with that. I very rarely get, you know, 6 hours at a stretch where I can just like sit down and paint anymore. In the time BC, before child, there was a little bit more of that availability, but these guys are done. We're going to set them off to the side, let the metallics dry thoroughly, and I don't know, sometime over the weekend after my daughter goes to sleep, or maybe while she's napping, we'll start getting these guys based up. So I would look to Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff over the weekend, and these guys will be they'll be making an appearance on there for sure. All right, they came out pretty good. I'm super happy with them. Okay, moving on back to the Squigs. All right, so we're gonna take this Squig, we're gonna put him back on our little handle here. We're gonna rinse this off. Pop our little thing back on the tip. Back into our wet palette here. Now this Squig in particular, he has some mushrooms growing on his back, which is always fun. He's also, looks like he's jumping over some mushrooms. Okay, so we're going back to our, what was this? Bugman's Glow. And we're just adding a second coat. We're just going for a couple of thin coats here, and we want good even coverage. So we're just keeping the paint thin, and we're moving it around, keeping it moving, and whoops. And that's helping us get that nice even coverage we're looking for. And we're just need a little bit more on the palette. Come on, give me that little. There it is. All right. Trying to get his little sort of underbelly here and underneath his haunches. It's very Interesting spot to try and reach. It just doesn't want to quite get in there. There we go. All about finding the right angles, I guess. Some folds in his legs I didn't quite get. That's better. There's just like this one little divot. Let's see. Pop him off this handle. Can I see it any better? No, not particularly. He's got this one little sort of like divot in on like what his armpit would be that I just can't seem to get a brush in there. At the magic angle, did I get it? We did it, team. We did it. Thank you for believing in me. So, jumping back to, I had mentioned earlier, the lore for my ogres. I don't think I went over that. Well, hello there, Mandy. Welcome to the stream. Good to see you. I don't know, because I don't have the battle tome for the ogre Ma tribes, so I don't know if any of this like is a thing that exists or not already. I feel like I may have heard it and like subconsciously stored some of it away and then kind of brought elements of it back. But anyway, so the idea for my ogre Ma tribes tribe let's just be redundant as possible here. The idea for them is that they were originally from the realm of beasts, and as they will end up containing at least their leader, I believe, will end up being a Beastclaw Raider, probably some dude on a stone horn. But they were being chased by the Everwinter, which is essentially, and this is like a pre-existing lore nugget for the Beastclaw Raiders specifically, but they're basically, and while this paint dries, I might as well just do this and I'll monologue for a little bit while paint dries. But the Everwinter is like a raging blizzard that's like magical and semi-sentient, and it basically just follows the Beastclaw Raiders around and just freezes everything. So it's real bad, and they're constantly like running away from it. But that being said, they were running away from it this one particular time, and they stumbled across, as they were going through the realm of beasts, a realm gate, which is essentially a portal from one realm to another. So from the realm of beasts, this portal led to Shyish, the realm of death. So they jump through the portal, and the Everwinter just passes right over it and basically freezes the gate shut, and they can't get back. So now they're trapped in the realm of death, and they have to sort of like adapt to life in the realm of death. Ogres are renowned for their appetite. They will eat everything in sight. They don't much care about anything. They're just ravenously hungry all the time, and they eat, and that's all they do. If memory serves, I think they exist in one of two states, which is eating or like chasing food. And that's basically, I think, the two. So, anywho. So it's the realm of death. They basically set up camp outside of an order city and act as like mercenaries for them for a good chunk. Because it's a small tribe, you know. But they basically, they resort to what they know, which is fighting. and so they become well-known mercenaries to various cities of Sigmar, and order cities within within the realm of death. And their sort of specialty is hunting down and killing undead, and specifically ghosts. Like, that's their jam. All because, as I said, they're always hungry, and when they came to the realm of death, they sampled all of the things and ate all of the things and discovered that the greatest delicacy they had ever had was ghost. And they basically love eating ghosts. So I believe they are now known as the sort of work in progress name I have for them, sort of tentative name, is the Soul Eater tribe. And they will be painted, their skin itself is going to be painted in like dark blue gray hues, with like a dark teal almost that goes from like their fingers up to like mid forearm. And it's basically just because they've been eating so many ghosts that they've started to like sort of like, I don't know, not absorb their, well, I guess absorb their ghostly something essence. So they've taken on a ghostly aspect, let's put it that way. So yeah, so anyway, that's the lore for those guys, and sort of what I have in mind for them. But these goblins, I got nothing. Like, I think they probably got here by accident too, somehow. Like, they're not smart. Goblins are dumb, let's be honest. And these guys probably, like, I don't know, maybe they were hunting something, or well, you know, there was, so before second edition launched, there was a big like game-wide like global thing called Malign Portents, and in that there were one for each of the Grand Alliances. There were these harbingers that had like developed the ability to like see and understand these malign portents and understood what was going on. And basically there was some evil shit going down in Shyish, the realm of death. And so all these armies started to converge there. So there was a goblin shaman that was sort of like leading groups of goblins to Shyish to like see what was going on and cause some trouble, basically. So it could very well be that these guys, this particular, group, we know what that term is. But anyway, this one bunch went to Shyish at his behest and has basically been here ever since because they're dumb and can't get home. All right. Anyway, so that might explain the how they got here, and possibly the why. But I don't know. All right. So our base coat is even. It is dry from the looks of it. So we are going to switch over to the dry brushing stage. So we need our Kislev flesh, which is of most of the Caucasian skin tones in the range, this is one of the lightest. So it goes from one of the darkest. Meant to do that. Okay, so this is one of the lightest, and it goes from one of the darker sort of Caucasian tan flesh tones or whatever to this one, and it's just basically dry brushing, and fairly heavily at that. So I'm just going to fold up this paper towel, using this to kind of soak up and blot up our Kislev flesh. Give the paint a wee mix. Here we go. All right, and this just goes on in like little circular motions, and we want like pretty decent coverage of this. We want this on the flats, on all the raised, you know, sort of like details. If it gets a little into the recesses, that's fine too. I wouldn't classify this as like an overbrush technically. This is just a vigorous dry brush. An overbrush is usually with more paint on a brush. This is still definitely a dry brush. It's just a really heavy one. And we can see how this side hasn't really been done. Like it's got a little bit on it, but like you can see how the recesses are still real dark. But this is getting pretty good coverage over all of the raised and flat areas. Whenever we feel like we need a little bit more, we're just going to reload our brush a little bit. We're going to come in and get his wee chin, some of his little underbelly. And the fact that I can't get this brush in to like get his underbelly is fine, because a lot of that's going to be in shadow anyway, and none of that, like, it doesn't have to be like as bright and highlighted as everything else. Plus two, like, you know, it could just very easily be that he's semi two-tone anyway, you know, like, kind of whatever. It works for us, not against us. Let's put it that way. There's no shame in it, no harm in it. All right. I think we're just about done with this step. And we're just kind of trying to make sure that we're getting a good solid dry brush. We want all sort of parts of him to be roughly the same level of dry brush. So just kind of giving him a 360 look over, making sure that we're getting that dry brush in, getting all the little bits and pieces we can reach with it. Cool. All right, that step is done. So we're not going to bother rinsing our brush, because then it's wet and it's no longer a dry brush. But we're then going to switch over to Flayed One Flesh, which is, I think it's now just technically classified as like a layer paint, but this is an older pot from when it was an edge paint, which means it's a little bit runnier than your average. So it's not great for dry brushing, but it's also, I mean, realistically, it's not that bad either. So we're just going to take a little dollop of this. Work that in. Now this, we're going to be going on the top. We want to basically get all the top side. And then we're going just top to bottom straight down with the rest of the dry brush. And this, we're not going heavy at all. We're going pretty light. We just want to get like the upper facing edges. And on the top of him, we want to get like an even spread sort of along the top. This is to, you know, simulate light coming down at him. So you can see like this way he's nice and bright, but if you look at him this way, he's still like pretty dark and shadowed underneath. So you get like a little bit of a gradient going on with the skin. But already like he's looking mostly done, because he is mostly done. So that, I think that actually wraps up the skin on this guy. Let me just do a little bit more on the top. With the mushrooms on his back, like, it's not quite, there we go, that's a little better. And down, down. Perfect. Okay. Now we can rinse our dry brush, because we don't need it anymore. The dry brushing stage is done. Yep, that looks pretty good. I may have gone on this one in particular, I may have gone a little bit overboard with that light color just now, but compared to the other two that I did, or three, but I'm not overly concerned. A little bit of variation in the group is not a bad thing. And again, nobody's really going to notice except me right now. +2 as the paint dries, it'll probably simmer down a little bit and darken up a little. All right. That brush is rinsed, relatively clean, and ready to use again later. Okay, next step. So we're going to take some of this Carroburg Crimson, which is like a dark red wash from Citadel. We're just going to give that a little bit of a shake. And I want to use this brush or something smaller. This is probably. So we're going to put a little bit onto our little brush here. And this is going all in and around the mouth. So we're getting the gums all in between the teeth. You can see here where his like lower lip kind of like curls down. You get like in there, and like I get like nice and around the mouth too, like kind of all over. Because realistically, it just sort of like adds to the look. And we're gonna make sure we get some little dots over or dollops around the eyes, and then the nose too. So basically, the whole front of his face is just kind of getting a wash in this. Now we don't want this pooling, and we don't want it super strong. Maybe I should have watered that down a smidge, but we're just gonna clean and void our brush. And we're gonna come along and we're just gonna wipe some of that away. Because again, we don't want it super dark. We just want it to like stain what we just did with the dry brushing, basically. Like so. All right, and then we can see we got the eyes. On top of that one a little bit with whatever's left in our brush. We'll come back in and wipe some away. There, that's good. All right, I'm happy with that. But you can see we got like where like the lips kind of like peel back. We got all in those little nooks and crannies. We got you know, a little bit on the chin, under the lip. We got the lower lip in general, which is good. Like I did on the goblins, they had sort of like a super pale skin tone as well, and I made sure to go in with a little bit of just a red glaze, and I got their nose. And I got their lower lip, and then their eyes on all of them, because I wanted them again kind of to have that like weird sore look, but I also wanted them to have like blood in their face to look a little bit more like alive, because I don't want them to look like super pale and, I mean, unhealthy, yes, but not like dead. Like they are still very much alive. There's blood pumping through them. And the places that you're going to register that on a human face is going to be like around the eyes, and like the middle of the face is usually where it's red, I believe. So anyway, that's why I chose to do that. Okay. That wash, because we put it on super thin and we wicked away all the excess pooling, it is dry. So we're ready to go on to the next step. So this guy doesn't have any horns. Like this fellow right here, he's got the big horn in the middle of his forehead there. And he's also got these little bony protrusions on his, like, down his back and on his, like, haunches. This guy just has the little mushrooms on his back, so we don't have to worry about that detail, but the claws are going to be the same sort of gray as that. I opted for gray as opposed to like a bone color because this guy is already so light that I didn't want to do another light color for that, so I opted for like a neutral gray color, which is good for two reasons. One, because it's a darker gray, you get that contrast between the lightness of the skin and the gray of the nails. But it's also like a very neutral gray as opposed to like a warm gray or cold gray. in theory, I think the cold gray might have been the way to go. But I didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't want a cold gray. So neutral was kind of the next logical step. And that's just because like I wanted to make sure that we had representation of, you know, cool colors, warm colors, etc. Again, for contrast's sake. But the mushrooms that are going to be on his back are going to be done in cool colors. So that will be the cool colors, and then the mushrooms on the ground will be done in the same cool colors, and then we're going to have like a warm... actually, the ground cover is going to be sort of like a desaturated-y brown, but it's going to end up on the warmer spectrum, I think. So by having like the neutral grays, like it's adding the contrast, but it's not detracting in any way, shape, or form by being like overly punchy, I guess. Especially since it's just in these like little isolated spots on this guy in particular. Color wise, we're starting out with Eshin Gray, and then doing a couple little layers of one of Dawnstone, and none of his claws are really big enough to warrant another like additional highlight. You're not really going to see it. But on the larger squig, I did the giant cave squig. He had what is it? Administratum gray was the it's just like an even lighter, paler gray, almost white, but not white. So anyway, you can see, I think, maybe not. There we go. Get that contrast. You can see the claws on the back leg there in that like dark gray. And the contrast between the light flesh and my super light flesh on my hand too, and that dark gray is pretty good. Now, his other foot, his claws are all weird and tucked up because he's like running. So his like hand is all kind of like this, like behind him, like he just pushed off. The one thing about these new Squig models is they're just super, super full of character. The goblins in general, that's like one of their major selling points for me, is they're just so fun and characterful. They're not what I would call a good army, in that they're not like overly competitive. They're not winning any like real tournaments. You know, I mean, you'll win a few games here and there maybe, but like they're not the winningest of armies out there. But boy, oh boy, are they fun. They're just like, just wacky. Just wacky fun. And I like that. Alright, so we got the nail. There's a mushroom cap next to it. We'll paint that later. All right, so that's the claws done. Super easy, right? All right, how did I do the teeth? Ah, yes, okay. I'm sort of having to recreate what I did by looking at my palette. And the colors that are on there, so I can remember what I did with some of this. I should probably write it down so I don't forget in the long haul. Anyway, I used Rakarth flesh for the teeth. And if you remember my previous statement about contrast, you might be asking yourself, but Wes, the skin is super pale, and now you're doing the teeth in a super pale color also. And yes, however, by adding that dark red trim around it, it adds separation between the light skin and the light teeth. Plus, I'll be going over this over the teeth with a wash, a dark brown wash, to really get into the recesses and add that contrast in there. And it also sort of makes this, like, it will tint this color a little bit darker. And then I can come along with like a highlight color and just really pop out the three-dimensionality of the teeth. And this also sort of gives them like a dirty sort of appearance, like towards the gum line, like they'll be all sort of like brown and grody looking. At this point, we're just trying to be careful. We don't want to get any paint on anything that we've already finished. So the gums and the skin. If there's a little bit of red, that sort of gum color on the teeth, like at the base, that's fine. It's not a big deal. That will actually interact nicely with the dark brown wash. And almost give a, sort of like crusty, dried blood appearance in like the base of the gums. So. Like whatever they last ate, they obviously didn't brush their teeth because they're squigs. They don't have hands or dental hygiene. But yeah, whatever they last ate is still clearly stuck in their teeth a little. All right. Give that a brush. Rinse. But you can see how this is starting to shape up. And they're basically like an angry set of jaws with legs. So it's angry set of jaws with legs that their only purpose, those legs, is to move that angry set of jaws closer to something to bite. There's something about that I find entertaining. So while we let the teeth dry, we're going to switch gears ever so slightly, and we are just going to paint his eyes. Now, for the eyes, I picked out this incredibly... There we are. Can we get any sort of color on that? Maybe? Oh boy, you're washed out. It's a super pale yellow. This is Dorn yellow, specifically. I like it because it's got just a little bit of color to it, but it really pierces out from the dark red in the recesses around it. But it's not like a bright glowing eye either. It looks almost like, again, like it's a cave-dwelling creature. It doesn't have the greatest like eyesight, almost like a cataract covered, sort of like eye. So this is the tricky part. I've never been particularly good at dotting eyes. That has always been something I have struggled with. So much so that most of my models don't have dotted eyes. But these guys, I needed to. It was like part of the whole scheme that I had in mind, was them having like really pale eyes. We did it. And yes, one eye is actually sculpted larger than the other. It's like he's sort of squinting a little bit. That's not me just being really bad at dotting eyes, although that does certainly play a role. But on this one in particular, it is sculpted that way. I don't know how well you can. Maybe if we do. Ah, yes. See? It's weird. He's a squig. Alright, we don't need the red anymore. We can get rid of that. We can move this somewhere. Don't need that brush. We dotted our eyes. What is our next step here? Let's do the Agrax Earthshade on the teeth. So again, we want to be fairly thin and controlled in our application here. I'm using what is this? A medium layer brush for this. We're going to bleed off the excess. We do want it, I suppose, cooling a little bit in between the teeth. But we don't want a ton of it cooling. So we're going to be wicking that away and moving it around. We are trying to like dirty and stain the teeth. So that's fine. So we're basically just covering all of the teeth, and you can see it's ever so slightly tinting them like a darker brown because this is a dark brown wash. But it is also settling nicely into, let's grab just a little bit more just to finish out those recesses there. Well, you can see it's doing a very nice job of like emphasizing where the recesses are in between the teeth, and I'm actually going to try and pull some up right at the gum line too. So we don't want to get it on the gums, but we want to get it like pooled in that recess. So I'm pushing it down on the tooth, like pushing it towards the gums so that it like settles up against them. And again, this sort of like adds some depth, but it also adds that sort of like, you know, unbrushed funk. There we go. That's pretty much the idea I'm going for. Perfect. I like where that's at. All right. So we're going to give that a little second to dry. While it does, we are going to do... What are we going to do? Ulthuan Gray is going to be our base for the mushrooms, and it is an ever so slightly blue tinted white, so it's a cold white, which is where our cold colors are coming into this model in particular. So we're going to just coat this all over the mushrooms on the bottom. Careful around the feet and the claws and stuff, because we don't want to catch those if we can help it. I mean, it's fairly easy to fix at this point if we do. But this gives us a solid base to come back in and paint these. And again, I don't know if in the lore, because I don't have the actual battle tome for this, I'm pretty sure it's an actual, like, real-life mushroom, ghost cap mushrooms. That sounds like a thing. But because this is the realm of death, I decided that it was going to be particularly renowned for these death cap mushrooms, which... the stalks of which are like this super pale, like whitish blue, and then the caps on the mushrooms are like an ethereal ghostly blue. Enter Nilic Oxide, the technical paint, or just sort of a quick coat over the mushroom caps, and then those will be done. I do actually, on the other mushrooms that I've done so far, I have gone in and on the stems with a watered down, what's it called here? Drakenhof Nightshade. It's like a dark blue wash. And I'll water that down so it's very thin. And it just kind of like tints the recesses basically in that dark blue. So it pulls a little bit of the blue and helps define the shape of the stalks a little bit. But it's not, you know, they still register as very pale. All right, now let's get the mushrooms on his back. Oh, there's a teeny tiny little wee baby mushroom poked in there. Like super tiny. Well done, sculptors. You really snuck that one in there. Trying to get the stalks without getting his flesh. We're good. Aha, that's the ticket. That's what we needed. We needed to thin our paint just a smidge more so it would flow a little better into some of those recesses. And we got it. All right, those mushrooms are done. So those teeth look like they are ready. So we are going to get this. This is pallid witch flesh is what color this is. And it's a very like pale, like creamy sort of off-white. And this, we're literally just with the side of our brush. We're going to come from about, basically cover the, say upper. We're leaving the base of the tooth and then doing 3/4 of the tooth just in like a line highlight, edge highlight, so that there's still that like sort of, again, the contrast is there. We want to leave the dark in the recesses on the sides so that they appear more cone-shaped. It sort of emphasizes that cone shape. So I'm where I can, I'm attempting to use the sort of the side of the brush to get like a nice sharp sort of line. The lower towards the sort of the base of the tooth I get, if I get a little bit wider with the stroke, it's fine because the tooth is a little bit wider as well there. I'm just trying to get a little something on there. Oh, all right. There's his pearly whites. Look at those chompers. But you can see pretty clearly the individual teeth. You get that contrast from the like the dark brown and then that pale off white. So it's still not like white, crisp, clean teeth. It's still like a little dingy. But that's where like the crud, where he's constantly chewing and biting, that's where the crud just gets rubbed off on his teeth. So I don't know. I'm a fan. Okay, so we're gonna grab just a little bit of our mid-tone gray here, and we're just gonna ever so slightly, because they're real small, so There's not a ton to highlight, but we're just going to pick out the tips of his little claws here, just so they've got a little something going on. And this is, you know, sort of the worn aspect of the claws as they sort of taper and get a little thinner towards the tips. They shift a little lighter. Not gonna lie, my inspiration for this particular like set of colors and the idea behind it was one of my dog's chew toys. It's got like this little curl of horn, and it's like a, you know, buffalo horn kind of thing. So it's like dark brown, gray, and has a lot of the same sort of look and color as it sort of curls towards the end. Anyway, so his claws are done, his eyes are done, his mouth is done, his skin is done. We really just have the mushrooms, and we're just capping those things, and then they're done. So we're just shaking up our nihilic oxide. Let's get it in shot there. It's a technical paint. This, I feel in a way, was sort of a predecessor to the contrast paints, as this goes on thicker than a wash, but it sort of shrinks away from some of the raised areas and collects more in recesses, almost like a wash, sort of somewhere in between a wash and a contrast paint. If that makes any sense whatsoever. Contrast paints are like a thing that GW quote unquote invented, and it's basically their branding of something that's kind of hovers between a glaze and, I don't know, it's weird. I've never actually used a contrast paint, so I'm not going to speak ill about them because I don't know really one way or the other. Some of them look like they would be useful and good for certain things. But that being said, this was around before those were. Typically, this is used for things like verdigris, but I actually use a watered down mix of this paint for all of my night haunt ghosts, which is why it sort of works here for these as well, because I want them to be, you know, realm of death again, and the ongoing thing where this sort of blue, bright blue color denotes the sort of realm of death and death magic and stuff like that. So these things being natural, growing from the ground, they're absorbing some of that, and so they're bioluminescent, and the caps glow this sort of ghostly, ethereal blue color. Which I think is cool as hell. All right, I think we got all the little nooks and crannies. We got a good even coat of this stuff on all the little mushroom caps. Perfect. All right, and with that, I believe this squig is done. Obviously, his base needs to be done. It will get the same treatment as this guy's base. So it's getting the, what is this, Sterling Mud texture paint, which is basically paint and probably a little bit of, I don't actually know if it has any like sort of glue in it or not, but it's got like sand and texture grit like mixed in with the paint, so it's like real thick. Anyway, so that's going to be heaped onto his base, washed with Agrax Earthshade, and dry brushed with probably, I think, Screaming Skull is what I've been using. Maybe Ushabti Bone. And that's what I've been doing all of my death bases in. It's just, you know, dark brown, kind of generic. And then I'll pop some grass tufts on in like a dead grass color. And we'll be done. So that's it, folks. That is how I'm painting my squigs, and it was nice and quick and easy. We finished this entire squig in like maybe half an hour, give or take. So not too shabby for a quick paint scheme. I do have a few more to paint up at some point. Because they're quick and easy, I will likely be trying to do those like over the weekend or something like that. And bounce back. So I'll try and probably hit some of those over the weekend and see if I can't. Wow, this camera! Boy, oh boy. But yeah, if I can get some of them finished up, then that would be sweet. And we'll get that project underway. My goal is I have my 20-man unit of the Stabbas done. I have the a start to the Squigs. This is a total of 12 in the unit. 10 of the actual Squigs, and then 2 of the Squig herders, so that's 2 more goblins that I actually need to paint. And then this guy has a rider, which I don't think I have in the house right now. Might be in there. But I think that's... Oh no, it's right here. I lied. Let's see if I can at least pull him out to show you before I take off for the night. Don't tell me he's not in here. Well, that's a bummer. All right, so I stand corrected. I must have left him out on the table where I was doing my priming. I was going to prime him separately. And but anyway, so it's a goblin with like a fancy helmet, and he's got like a lance, and he's very much fancies himself a knight. So he's like holding on to the squig with one hand, like bouncing up in the air with this lance held out like he's charging. Utterly ludicrous, and I love him. But anyway, he's going to be the general for my army because that's just kind of how I want to run it. But the idea is it's going to be him, several squigs, the squig herders, and the Stabbas, and that will be basically where my battle report sort of like takes off from. So it's going to be an assortment of that. I do have other goblins that there's other squig riders as well. There's 2 different levels. There's like the basic squig hoppa, which is, you know, just like a random goofy goblin dude with like it's basically like if you picture one of these guys, the Stabbas, with their sword or mace or whatever, it's basically one of these guys riding a squig. So no armor, no fancy weapons, just goofy melee weapons, just riding squigs into battle. So there's those. I have 5 of those. And then I also have 5 of what's called a Boing Grot Bounda, which is like the level up from that, the more elite version. So they have lances. They think they're all knights. They're wearing like metal helmets, and they're all riding. I think some of their squigs actually have a little bit of armor too. But yeah, so they're just goofy. And at some point they will be painted up and sort of like factored into it. But that's literally 5 and 5. I have 5 of each, so that's a total of 10 models that need to get painted. So I've already got the bulk of the army painted right now, between the 20 Stabbas, and then the Squigs that I've got done now, plus the rest of that unit that's primed and will probably be done by the end of the weekend. So yeah, that's decent progress on them. Like, I don't have a ton of them. It's a small force. It's like maybe 500 points, 600 points, something like that. So it's not a big army. But it will be nice to have the entirety of it done and painted. And again, since I'm planning on using it in some of the battle reports, especially early on, it's going to be small point values anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Like, that 500-600 points is going to be like more than I'm going to have probably in like one battle for the initial couple of reports. It's probably going to be very like skirmish style for like some of the initial stuff. At least that's kind of the plan. So we'll see. Anyway, I don't want to give too much of that away. I think I've teased it a fair amount, and I want to continue teasing it without giving a ton of it away. Yeah, look forward to that coming up in a few weeks. Probably the first like couple of them. Okay, with that, let's switch over to the closing screen here. So first and foremost, I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank you for stopping by, spending some time with me, hobbying along with me, hopefully, or at the very least, just, listening in while I do my thing and, running it in the background while you do whatever it is you're doing. Next week, the last time I said this, that I was going to be back to Friday, all of a sudden we weren't back to being on Friday. I believe the only Friday coming up that I know or have a strong inclination I'm not going to be around is the weekend of my daughter's birthday. So up at the end of the month. We're planning some sort of a weekend thing. So for that, I will also be doing a Thursday show and then posting it up on the Friday to YouTube. Obviously, I want to send you all to my social medias. So follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Wes Odinson, WESODINSON. And you can keep up on any of my hobby sort of like work in progress stuff. I also on Instagram I'll post up 2 pictures of my daughter from time to time, so that's fun. But it's largely like painting, like hobby stuff. Pictures of I'll probably do some like behind the scenes pictures of some of the battle report stuff. Like if there's a cool scene, I'll make sure to snap the pictures and stuff. Post those up to Instagram, and by extension Twitter and Facebook as well. YouTube, guys, YouTube channel, it's up and running. All these videos go up there. I encourage you all to head over and subscribe. If you've seen a video and you liked it, like the video. If there's videos up there you haven't seen, watch them, like them, share them with your friends if you think somebody would enjoy this. It's just youtube.com/users/Wes Odinson. So it's all the same name. You can just search in YouTube for Wes Odinson. Again, it's WESODINSON, and that'll pop right up in there. Greatly appreciate that. I think that's it for like sort of the usual closing stuff. On a broader topic, your sort of weekly reminder that Black Lives Matter, and change needs to happen. It's slowly getting there, I think, maybe. Yeah. So keep fighting the fight. Aside from that, too. Take care of yourselves out there, guys. Like, seriously, COVID is still raging out there and starting to pick up numbers all over the place. People are getting comfortable. They're going out. They're hanging out with friends. They're doing all kinds of stuff. They're not wearing their masks, etc., etc. Just be smart, guys. Don't be silly. We'd all like to get back to some semblance of normalcy. whatever our new normal is after the smoke clears here, and it's just those of you that aren't sort of doing your part are making it harder for the rest of us. So, you know, the rest of us would really like to see our friends, and instead of being selfish, if you took like, you know, a month and just didn't see anybody for a month, this whole thing would just go away, essentially. But yeah, anyway, that's enough of that. I hope everybody has themselves a good week. Be safe out there, guys. Be smart, and we'll see you, I think, Friday. I'm pretty sure. If anything changes, look to Facebook, Twitter, etc., and I'll keep you guys sort of up on the situation there. But all right, that's enough of me. Again, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next week.